So let's take a look at the skirt pattern. You should have copies of my plastic patterns, and there should be a total of 6 pattern pieces. You'll have the skirt front, which has 2 rounded edges, flat sides. It's a big, wide pattern piece with 4 darts at the top. Make sure when you're transferring these patterns to your pattern paper that you're marking all of the notches. You'll find notches along the edges of these patterns, as well as small drill holes at each of the dart points. Make sure to mark your center front, your grain line, so you know how to position this on your fabric. You'll have the skirt front, 2 skirt back pieces. So you'll have a skirt back and another skirt back. You'll find they are mirror images of one another. Again, 2 darts along the top with notches and drill holes. 3-point darts, similar to our sample book. Don't forget there's also a drill hole down here on each of these. Make sure you're copying those little drill holes as well. Those are important. And you'll see they have an extra little outlet piece at their center back, which we will discuss later on when we go into the construction of our skirt. So 2 center back pieces. A waistband pattern piece. Remember to read your pattern cutting instructions. Cut 1 of self, cut 1 interfacing. The self fabric is the fabric that you choose to make your garment out of. It's the fabric that shows to the outside that everyone can see. It's whatever kind of fashion fabric you choose. So if you ever see the term self used on a pattern, it means whatever fashion fabric you want on the outside of your garment. Make sure you're marking all your notches. You'll see there's some areas that indicate center back, center front, center back. What's interesting about our waistband, however, is it's got 2 grain lines. There's a grain line listed in this direction, and there's also the grain line listed in this direction. You can cut your waistband in any orientation you like, either the grain going in this direction or this direction. Depends on how you want your fabric to lay. You may have a printed fabric, and you may want your print to match up with the print of the rest of your garment, and you may not want it to match up. You might want it to be going in the opposite direction. Just don't cut your waistband on bias. Just keep your grain line either vertical or horizontal when you go to cut this. But again, cut 1 self and cut 1 interfacing. That's going to be fusible, lightweight, or fusible weft interfacing. And then you'll have 2 interfacing pieces, skirt interfacings. They should be, again, a mirrored pair. And they should look fairly familiar because they match that extra little outlet that exists on the backs, the center back of our skirts. This is just to be cut from interfacing, cut 1 of interfacing of each of these. Now I mentioned that our pocket patterns are fairly useful. We can use these to decide what kind of pockets we want on our skirts. I'm going to place a different colored work surface on here so maybe we can see things a little clearer. So let's say you want to place a slash pocket onto your skirt. These are the 4 pattern pieces that were given to you for the slash pocket. The slash pocket front garment pattern, the slash pocket back garment pattern, and then the slash pocket bottom bag and top bag. You might notice, here's my skirt front. Let me grab one of my skirt backs. There's my skirt back. You might notice there's a similar curve happening on these patterns. It's because the patterns for these sample books were derived from this skirt pattern. And you can line up your center back, your skirt back pattern with the back garment pattern, and you'll find that the seam allowance matches, the notches match, the notches for your dart, and the drill hole for your dart should all match. It's the same pattern. So we know that if you want to use the slash pocket on your skirt back is already taken care of. We don't have to make any changes to that. The front of the pattern, however, does need to be changed if you're using the slash pocket pattern. Because here's our slash pocket front garment pattern. And if we place this aligning our notches for our darts and our dart point, we can also align this hip, this notch, it exists here along the hip. We'll see that suddenly there's a big piece that's slashed out of the front of our pocket, hence the term slashed pocket. So we've got to remove a whole section at the front of our garment. We've also got two extra pieces, the pocket bag bottom and top. These have to be cut from your fabric as well. They're not included with the original pattern because I don't know whether you want to use the slash pocket or not, but if you do, you're going to have to cut a mirrored pair of each one of these because you're going to have a slash pocket that will fit to this side of your skirt and another one that will fit to this side of your skirt. Same thing for your bottom pocket bag. That corresponds to the hip curve that you have here. That will match to this side of the skirt, and you'll have to have a mirrored pair to match the other side of the skirt. So make sure you're clear on which pattern pieces you want. Contact me if you're not certain of how many of these to cut, whether to cut two, cut a pair, because there's a difference between cutting two of the same pattern piece versus cutting a mirrored pair. Let me show you what my pattern looked like from previous quarters, where I use the slash pocket. It's my preferred pocket, so I will be using it during my demos for this quarter as well. Here's my skirt front, modified to fit my slash pocket. I've placed my sample book pattern, matching my hip curve, matching the darts, and then I marked on my pattern to say, okay, I need to remove right here. I need to make sure I have notches here and that I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance included on both sides of my pattern. And then I removed that. So this became my new front skirt piece. So I slashed these two pieces away, and then I knew that I was going to have to cut a mirrored pair for each of these. But the back from our sample book has no modification to it, so we don't have to do anything to the back. So if you're thinking of the slash pocket, make sure that you take your front and make the necessary modifications to both sides by lining up your slash pocket front garment pattern to both sides. And you can always draft 1/2 of your pattern, fold it in half, and trim both layers at the same time to ensure that you get a symmetrical pattern when you're finished. Let's take a look at the modification needed for the inseam pocket. Here are the patterns for the inseam pocket, the front garment, back garment, and the pocket bag. Again, if I match this up to my front garment along that hip curve, the side seam hip curve goes along the hip of the body. Darts should be matching up, notches for the darts, and the dart point should be matching up. This little notch here at the hip should match up as well. But as I mentioned during the demo for the inseam pocket, we have this added outlet of fabric over here. Now, I also mentioned during that demo that this extra piece here, and you've seen once we attach this, it attaches out here. So it creates this very wide pattern. Now, if you want to lay this sample pattern on top of your copied pattern, and you want to add this extra outlet and these extra seam allowances, tailor's tacks, stitching lines, and you just want to add that little bit of extra to both sides, of your skirt front pattern, you're welcome to do so. And then if you want to cut this, a mirrored pair of your pocket bags from two separate types, from a different type of fabric, a cheaper fabric perhaps, you're welcome to do so. Just make sure that it's a mirrored pair. If, however, you want to join these patterns together, folding back or trimming off the seam allowance on the pocket bag, and combining these two patterns together, you are more than welcome to do so. This is a quicker and faster method of adding inseam pockets that doesn't require us to cut the pocket bag from a different fabric. You can tape these patterns together, pin them together, whatever you need to, and you can add the entire pocket bag, tailor's tacks, seam, stitching lines, all at once, to both sides of your skirt front. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, but know that by doing that, your skirt pattern suddenly becomes 6 to 8 inches wider on either side, which means you need more fabric to cut it. That's why we make the pocket bag. We typically make the pocket bag from a different fabric so we don't have to cut a piece that's so wide. Because that costs money, especially if you're spending $20, $30, $40 a yard on really nice fabric. Just make sure whatever changes you make, whether you add just the outlet or you add the outlet and the pocket bag all in one, just make sure you do the same to both sides of your pattern, so that they are symmetrical. Now the back, the two skirt backs, it's the same story. Here is my inseam pocket back garment pattern. And again, the hip curve, side seam curve should match up. Notches should match at the dart. Dart point should match. There's that added outlet, because we have the outlet on both the front and the back skirt pieces. Same thing over here. Line up that hip curve and that dart, those dart points, to add your extra outlet of fabric. Again, you can add just the outlet of fabric to both sides, both skirt backs. You can add the outlet with the added pocket bag all in once. But again, it makes your pattern much wider, and it's going to cost more fabric for you to cut if you include this with your fashion fabric. Otherwise, get a cheap cotton fabric, cotton poplin or something like that, to cut your pocket bags out of. You'll have to do the same if you decide to include the pocket bag in your full pattern on the fronts and backs. You'll need to do the same for this side as well. Extra pocket bag all the way added out. So suddenly these pattern pieces have to be way far apart on your fashion fabric so you have enough room to cut everything. So that's the inseam pocket. You're more than welcome to do so. Make the necessary modifications to your pattern paper first before you lay your patterns onto your fabric. But take a look at some of the implications for using some of these different types of pockets. The patch pocket. You won't need the patch pocket garment pattern. You're already going to have a garment to sew this to, so you don't need this. But you will need the patch pocket pattern itself, and you'll need 2 of these because I want 2 pockets on your garment. Now, where you place these patch pockets is entirely up to you. You can place them on the back, you can place them on the front. It's up to you. The tricky part is positioning them. I do not recommend positioning your patch pocket anywhere near your darts, either on the front or the back of your pattern. Place them below your darts, but keep that in mind. These are 5-inch deep darts. This is going to sit very low on the back of the body. So you might want to put them onto the front of your pattern, just below the darts. The darts on the front of the skirt are only 3 inches deep. 3 to 3.5 inches deep, so you may just want to place them just below your pattern. Now you notice during our demo, we had to mark out on our, excuse me, we had to mark out on our garment sample or garment pattern where we were going to place this. So you've got to use your rulers. You've got to use any L-square rulers that you have. You might want to map out the points for your pockets, knowing that it's 5 inches wide. Where are you going to place these so that they're symmetrical on either side? You may have to start mapping out some horizontal lines, some vertical lines to give yourself some guidelines and points for where you're going to position these. Because if we don't put those guidelines on there, we could end up with tilted pockets, which you might want. But do you want them symmetrical on either side? Or are they going to be asymmetrical? Is that going to look the way you want it to? Is that something that you would put together and put onto a garment rack or something you would sell? So think about your positioning for your pockets. I don't recommend putting them anywhere along your darts, because drafting that out means you need to sew your darts first, then place your work onto a dress form, and then mark out, pin your pockets into place, and eyeball to make sure it's as level as possible. It can be very difficult, very tricky. It's easier, I think, to cut out your fabric, lay your pattern on top of your fabric, cut out the pattern and the fabric all at once, and then go in here, use your pocket pattern. You've got a copy of it. You can always make more copies, and position it where you want to, and then give yourself some guidelines. 2 little tailor's tacks is enough, so you can mark out the 2 corners for where this should go. The more marks you can give yourself, so 2 little tailor's tacks up here where these corners will go, the more marks you can give yourself, the better. If you can map out the entire pocket without seam allowance onto your fabric, and know that it's not going to leave marks or chalk or anything on the right side of your fabric, that would be awesome. You can mark where this will go on the wrong side of your fabric while your fabric is flat before you sew your darts or anything. And then use basting stitches, hand basting stitches, to then stitch through, thread trace from one side to the other. If you mark the wrong side of your fabric, you can use that basting stitch to create a line of stitching to the right side of your fabric that's not going to mark your fabric. It's not going to leave any residue on your fabric. It's going to be removed afterwards. And then you have a clear delineation of where you're going to position your pattern, where you're going to position your pocket, after you install it. You saw the demo videos for the slash pocket and the inseam pocket. Those would be installed after everything is cut and whatnot. You can sew your darts first and then do the slash pocket and inseam pocket. The patch pocket, however, if you're placing your patch pocket below your darts, away from your side seam, just kind of floating out here in the space of your skirt, attach them first. That's the only difference between your slash inseam and your patch pocket. The inseam and the slash pocket have to be installed after you've done all the darts and whatnot, but the patch pocket is much easier to install on a flat surface, similar to how we did in the demo book. So work with your fabric while it's flat. Mark your fabric while it's flat so you know where to position your pocket. Cut your pocket from fashion fabric, whatever kind of fabric you want to use. Maybe you get a contrasting fabric if you want the pockets to pop from the garment itself. But position those first while your fabric is flat, because it's going to get more and more complicated once you start sewing your darts and your fabric suddenly starts to have more shape to it, more three-dimensional shape. It gets very difficult to place your patch pockets. So think about your order of operations. Decide what pockets you'd like to use, given the instructions in this video and the warnings in this video, and make some executive decisions.